So depolarizing, meaning, we talked about electrical charge in our cells earlier. Our teeth have also a positive and negative charge. If we're depolarized, the polarities flip from a net negative to a positive charge, dropping the voltage in that circuit. Now, I used to be an electrician back maybe 12, 30, oh my goodness, what year are we in? 14 years ago. Look into this. It started to piece together very quickly. I was like, all these pieces of the jigsaw puzzle started to come together. I thought, oh, okay.
Welcome back, everyone, to Wellness at the Speed of Light podcast. This is episode number 7. We're very excited today to have Neil Gannon on the show. For those of you who do not know who Neil Gannon is, he's the 3-time author of 3 amazing books, the first of which was The Mojo Multiplier. He followed that up with The Vitality Secret, which was a #1 bestseller, and his latest book is The Vitality Code, which my wife is currently reading, I've read, and I'm very excited to dive into his 4 pillars of leading a vital and healthy lifestyle, which include focusing on the physical aspect, the mental aspect, the emotional aspect, and the energetic. Now, he has developed a very big practice where he helps people to get over their chronic inflammatory issues and their own health problems in leading a more vital life. We're going to pick his brain today extensively on what is inflammation, how do epigenetics turn genes on and off, what is that science about, and how does eating inflammatory or being exposed to toxins and things like that affect the expression of our genes. We're going to talk about mitochondrial health, cellular health. We're going to talk about exercises. We're going to talk about different types of diets. We're going to dive deep into meditation practices, energy fields, trapped emotions, and all types of extremely exciting things for me to ask him about. And on that note, let's dive right in with Neil. All right, well, we're pleased to have Neil Gannon on the show today and very excited, to talk to you. Got a chance to go through some of your book. Like I told you earlier, my wife is reading it and she has nothing but amazing and positive things to say about it and how clear and concise it is. The Vitality Code, and I just urge our listeners to go out and check it out for themselves. But on that note, one of the things I've heard you talk about before on some of your appearances is that you struggled with your own personal health journey, and that's really how you got into this space to begin with. So can you tell us just a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and how you ended up diving so deeply and helping so many people with their health issues?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show, Stefano. I'm really excited for this conversation.
My pleasure.
So yes, like just about everyone I know, if not everyone I know who works in holistic health and healing, I come with my own story of healing and reversing something which was supposedly incurable. It was eczema. Some people grow out of it. I didn't. Some people, it just seems to get worse and worse. And it was getting worse and worse for me. It lasted about 30 years. And it wasn't actually until my dad suffered a stroke when I started researching what led to his stroke. And then I realized that the underlying cause of his stroke was actually the same underlying cause of my eczema. Although I don't like to say my eczema, let's just call it the eczema from which I was suffering to separate that identity. So my father was diagnosed with chronic inflammation a few years prior to his stroke by his naturopathic doctor sister, my aunt. And for some weird reason, I remember so well where we were in the family home. We were in the kitchen and he was making us tea. And he told me, I've got this thing called chronic inflammation. I don't know what it is. So several years later, he had the stroke. And I remember this memory. And that's when I started thinking, I started just listening to my heart, ultimately. My intuition was telling me that he did not have to suffer this stroke. I'd already written an ebook, actually, about increasing testosterone naturally for guys. And that was what got me into the kind of the realm of holistic health initially. And I started seeing this word inflammation everywhere. So I was thinking, hang on, I'm seeing this word inflammation everywhere. It's led to my dad's stroke. I'm hearing that it's underlying just about everything. So I started looking into it. So I did. And very quickly, I realized that the chronic inflammation wasn't just behind his stroke and the hypertension that led to the stroke, i.e., high blood pressure. Also, the asthma he'd had since 12. It was also behind the eczema I'd had since I was a toddler. So I went about ultimately an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle, and very quickly it went away from within. And prior to that, I was using steroid creams, harmful prescription moisturizers, and you look at the ingredients of those things, we've got to be super careful what we put on our skin, and antibiotics when it got really bad. So I went about just an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle, got rid of it. And then I thought, well, maybe this can work for other things as well. So, and it does. It works across the board for so many different illnesses. So that's really how I got into this world of, I guess, vitality and addressing the underlying cause of most illnesses, which is chronic inflammation.
Well, so, one of the, what I loved and why I really wanted to get you on the program is because just from what I've seen of your appearances and what you're talking about in your books, one of really my frustrations as a physician has been that, and something that you've realized and you've said very well, is that the vast majority of the diseases that we experience as human beings in the modern age are man-made, and the vast majority of them are preventable. I don't say that because I'm trying to sell anybody a product or doing anything. It's just self-evident. And the fact that people, don't realize this is very frustrating to me as a physician, because I think we're asking the wrong question. We're not asking, why did this happen and how do we prevent it in the first place? We're asking, well, how do we treat this guy's eczema with giving you all kinds of prescriptions and creams and everything, and say, well, this has this ingredient and this works this way and this steroid works this way. That's all good and well for acute things or things where you're saving a life. But for these other things, you're just hitting the nail right on the head with going down the preventing inflammation. Now, you talk about inflammation. I think that but when people say inflammation, that word, it means redness to it. It doesn't mean, can you define inflammation in a way that we can pull anybody off the street and say, this is what inflammation is, and they can understand it?
I love that you just asked that question in that way, because I think if any of us can explain inflammation really simply, it really makes health simple. And I don't think health was designed to be complicated. I don't think we need a doctorate or a PhD to figure out some just fundamentals. Of course, absolutely, doctors have their purpose and phenomenal value. I think as the driver of our body, I don't think it was designed to be that complicated. And I believe it could be simplified, and that's what I try and do the best at. So here goes for my definition of inflammation for anyone to understand. By the way, when I asked this question, I spoke at UCLA at the beginning of 2020, and I said, who's heard of inflammation? And everyone put their hands up. And I said, who can explain what it is? And just one or two people put their hands up. I describe it as it's our immune system's reaction to what it perceives as an attack on the body, a potential threat. So that can be a physical threat, or it can be a perceived threat. So a physical threat is something enters the body, or we are exposed to something which is foreign or alien, is like an alien intruder. The immune system goes into defense. It's a very healthy immune response. It's there to protect us. If we didn't have it, we'd die. We've got to be grateful for our army of defenders, I call it. And if something foreign enters the body, some kind of toxin, or again, we're exposed to something, that has the potential to create an inflammatory response. So what can that be? That might be something toxic in the food supply. It might be in the environment and beyond. And it might be something internal to the body. It could be an infection or something. It could be a parasite. Or it could be chronic stress, which we've often all heard that it's about 90% of illness is down to chronic stress, which is a perceived threat. It's like living in moderate fight or flight, as if we're trying to get away from a saber-toothed tiger. So that's my definition of inflammation. I hope, was that simple enough? Do you think?
I think that's a great, description of, what we call inflammation. The way I tell my patients, because that was very elegant, but I just say, what, if you slap your hand and your hand turns red, That's it, and it stays red for a couple of days. That's inflammation. That's the body kind
Yeah.
of fighting that insult that it just had, and it goes along with everything else. And so when you're inflamed in the body, people have to understand it affects your joint health. It affects your cardiac vessels. That's why we get all this, that's why, quintuple bypasses are like, it's just like you just get the menu at Burger King and say, yeah, give me a quadruple or a quintuple bypass. I'm ready to go. That's all the downstream effects of inflammation. And inflammation is just devastating. And you start talking about things like early onset Alzheimer's disease and all these other things that we're doing to ourselves because of inflammation. So I think that's great. One of the things that I want to ask you is, and again, just to simplify it, how bad is the inflammation epidemic amongst people? So is it something where like 10% of the population has it, or are most people suffering from some degree of at least low-lying inflammation, which is harmful to them?
I would say the majority of the population suffers to a degree of inflammation without knowing, because very few people test themselves for it. I heard Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a few days ago. He's one of my favorite people, despite what is his censorship behind what he's doing. He said that $4.3 trillion is spent a year on chronic illnesses, for which the vast majority are inflammatory. So in America, there's more money spent on sick care, which is masquerading as healthcare, and yet America has one of the sickest populations. So what's going on there? Well, if everyone understood what inflammation was, it would be a lot easier, I think. And to your point, I think, and to your question, I believe most people are experiencing it without really understanding that they have it. It might just be brain fog. It might be depression. It might be a third of cases of depression. Even in the media a few years ago, they linked depression with chronic inflammation. If we have inflammation of the gut, we have inflammation of the brain. There's a two-way connection or two-way direction of communication. So some people might have something just very mild, or they might not even realize because their energy is low. And it's not until they then go on an anti-inflammatory diet, for example, or diet and lifestyle, where they get rid of this brain fog. This layer of fog just disappears. And then they suddenly go, I've got more energy. My energy's gone through the roof. And I talk about discovering the energy you never knew you had, because it's subtle over the years. And it's not until you clean the body out and you rediscover this energy that you once had, your life force energy, ultimately.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. So you said that in a way that's very easy to understand. There's just there's just so many people are suffering from inflammation, but it's like the frog. I did a post on LinkedIn and maybe a month ago about the frog in the slowly boiling pot. It's like you have this inflammatory response. It's going on, and maybe you're just not feeling well. You have a little bit of brain fog, whatever, but you are a ticking time bomb. You're becoming metabolically unhealthy without really knowing it. No one, like you pointed out, people are not checking it. You're not getting your CRP checked and some other, inflammatory markers, looking at other things that might be going on. And then all of the sudden, out of anywhere, people are shocked that they are found to have kidney disease or heart disease, or they're in this failure, or they're diabetic, or they've become, because they're all, components of the same thing. And there's this study out of Vanderbilt, which looked at they looked at cross-section of the population. They found only 1 out of 15 people would be considered metabolically healthy, which is insane, which is exactly what you're saying. So we can say it in different ways until we're blue in the face, but until we find that secret, sauce to just just push this on people to understand how important it is to stay. And that's what we're going to talk about with your 4 pillars and how to, work on staying out of it. But it's like you can't see it sometimes, and it's subtle, and that's the frustration, because then when it boils over, then you're in the medical ICU. And then my people are trying to fix whatever's going on. And one of the things I absolutely loved what you say, and I'm going to use it, and that is sick care masquerading as healthcare. That's my new favorite slogan. Thank you. I'm going to just pound the table with that.
Yeah.
So I just, before we get into the great way that you outline your four pillars, I just want to ask you, you had that previous book, The Vitality Secret, and now you've written your second book. And so what spurred you to write this second book? What's different about the second book? And how did you come to categorize it so simply into those four boxes?
Yeah, great question. So this is, I happen to have it next to me. It's the Vitality Code is the latest one. The first book was really revealing what inflammation is and addressing it predominantly from a nutrition standpoint, with a bit on exercise, a bit on managing stress, grounding. Really, I suggest that's where people start if they're new to this whole thing called inflammation. And I've had a friend, actually, I was on his supporting team. He reversed cancer in less than 2 months, stage 2 lymphoma at the beginning of last year. I can't say I did it. I was on his supporting team and I was suggesting things to him very regularly. And, there's a few of us. I knew that he'd reverse it because he said, this cancer has been created somehow. I've created it somehow. There's got to be some kind of toxicity. Let's get rid of the toxicity. He was advised chemo and radio. And anyway, he thoroughly detoxified his body, addressed the trauma, and he replenished his body, and lo and behold, less than 2 months, it goes away. So I bring him in because he's been recommending my book to lots of his community, lots of his friends, his family, and just said, start here because it's quite simple. And I always do my best to be simple. So simplify things. So with the Vitality Code, what I realized was, whilst most people got results, when I started coaching in 2015, most people get results with anti-inflammatory nutrition, addressing the gut health from a nutrition standpoint, moving more. If someone isn't moving, we need to get moving. We need to get oxygenating. We need to get detoxifying. And there's some fundamentals. But what I realized was it goes deeper than just the physical. It goes deeper than even addressing toxins in our environment other than food. It goes into the mental health. I don't like saying mental health because that has a weird kind of a connotation. But the point is our thoughts and our beliefs. What are we thinking on a day-to-day basis? Are we activating the placebo effect or are we activating the nocebo effect? The placebo effect, of course, is when we take an inert substance and we think it's an actual drug, and we believe through the sheer power of belief that drug's going to get rid of our symptom. We take it every day, maybe several times a day for weeks or months, whatever. And sure enough, the body seems to get rid of the symptom. That's the power of the mind over the body. The nocebo effect is that in reverse. So it's been scientifically proven that we can heal the body through thought alone. It's also been scientifically proven that we can we can create illness through thought alone. So we need to be aware of our mental state, the environment that is created in our body through our thoughts and our beliefs. And then we also have the emotional pillar, which is huge. We talked about chronic stress earlier. I didn't know until I started diving into transformational programs and the likes of Tony Robbins back in, a decade plus ago, that stress isn't what we're told that it is. If I knew about stress as I know it now, back in the day when I was a child or going through school, taking exams or university exams, I think this would have been a huge benefit to me. So I didn't realize that with stress, for example, so 90% of illness is down to chronic stress. What is stress? My favorite definition came from the book Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He said, stress is your internal response to external strains. Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about it as it's our perception of our environment. It's our perception of our world. It's not the stationary cars in a traffic jam that cause stress. They are just lots of inanimate objects. It's how we are perceiving that traffic jam and what it means for us in that moment. And we're doing it mostly subconsciously. So ultimately, it's the meaning that we give to our experiences, our life events, that creates the stress in the body or doesn't. Some people can be totally chilled in a traffic jam. Others are going to be causing road rage, and you can virtually see the blood, in their foreheads with veins popping out of their neck. So the emotional side of things is massive, and that's another pillar. And another major part of emotional, by the way, is how we store these trapped emotions and trauma. So as we peel back the layers of the onion beyond food and diet and lifestyle and toxins, we start going, okay, how are my thoughts and my beliefs, how are my emotions, am I stressed, am I living by the hormones of stress, and why am I living by the hormones of stress? Hang on, why am I reacting in this way all the time? Is it some form of PTSD? And then you peel back the layers of the onion and we realize that we've all got stored trauma, we've all got trapped emotions. And it doesn't have to be a huge event. It could be something that we've completely forgotten about, a little argument with a sibling when we're 5 years old or something. And we talk about little T's, big T's, little traumas, big traumas, but they're ultimately stored in the body, and it actually drops the voltage to our organs. And that's when we talk about the body electric as well. But if we can release that energy, it actually frees up the electrical systems and allows the voltage to rise again, and the body can heal itself. And so you're getting the idea, it's going deeper and deeper into all these different angles. And I talk about the 4 pillars of health. The final one is the energetic realm. And that's when I think things get really exciting. We step into the world of the quantum and meditation and energy and understanding us as energy beings in physical bodies, and starting to become aware of people reversing the most incurable of incurable illnesses imaginable. And you might have seen in my book, I've referenced Dr. Joe Dispenza a few times, and Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden, and I've been drawn to them for many years. And I've recently attended a few retreats in Cancun with Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm just fascinated by the data that he's got. What happens in the body when we meditate, when we visualize, when we're in a heart and brain coherent state. It's like we're literally changing our biochemistry with thought, ultimately. So we can actually secrete a concoction of chemicals in our body generated by our brain chemist, in the words of Bruce Lipton. I love that term, the brain chemist. We can secrete a concoction of chemicals in our body superior to any drug. That's crazy. It's amazing to me. So that's a kind of a summary of the 4 pillars. But it went from Vitality Secret to the Vitality Code, because I realized some people weren't healing with just, including myself, with just nutrition.
When I was reading about you, and I've heard you speak before, when I saw that you were, I don't want to call it a disciple, that's people get whatever. I like Tony Robbins as well, but I've read many of Joe Dispenza's books. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think that people really should learn about Dispenza and what he talks about. And I'm a massive believer. I see it every single day as a surgeon. And I actually counsel my patients based on some of the stuff that I learned. No, I'm going to tell them to go on retreats and meditate. You understand, like the general population, that's way beyond them. But talking about what their mental state is and what they believe is going to be their outcome, it is so crystal clear. First of all, it's borne out in studies what your mental outcome, and your surgical outcome. But even with my patients, if they go in with a very positive frame of mind, thinking they're going to do well, they have such a great start, and they can actually heal themselves faster. Their wounds can heal faster. Their bodies heal faster. Their pain control is much better. They need way less narcotics, even after like a major spinal surgery or something like that. And it's just unbelievable what the body is designed to do as far as healing itself. I know that's really big for you, about the body being able to heal itself. And I can, just tell our listeners, as a physician, it is crystal clear that having positive energy, being around positive people, using mantras, using meditation, having, affirmations, all these things it's people should really do the research on this stuff and how much it changes, as opposed to our negative patients, right? They have a car accident. Oh, I'm never going to get better. This is terrible. My life is horrible, whatever. That's the opposite, of effect, right? They spiral down into this situation where they are pretty much hopeless, but they're actually also secreting the chemicals of stress, which are then keeping them in that same kind of, frame of not healing, not being able to heal their own body. So I would love to go to one of these Joe Dispenza retreats one of these days. And I got all the material for it, but I know that because they're so advanced, he wants you to do the whole, like, go through all these things before you even go there. So I'll get there. I'm gonna get there. I
Yeah.
absolutely believe in the stuff, and I think that's amazing. And that is the most exciting part of it, because so much of what we can do is really can be drug-free, procedure-free. And I just, again, not to go back to, like, things that I'm putting out on social media, but I'm just trying to get, which is why I'm so excited I have you on the show. I'm trying to get these messages, across to people. And again, it's about, why are our hospitals filled with all of these people? 90% of the people that are there for chronic, like you said, shouldn't even be there, but that is not where the focus is of the medical community. The focus is on what is the latest and greatest thing we can do to keep this patient alive, get them out of the ICU, get them to the floor, and get them off to wherever. But having people living long lives where they're sick and unwell doesn't make any sense. And I think if they follow your 4 pillars, without question, they're going to lead much, much, happier and healthier lives, and going to be able to reverse a lot of things and prevent a lot of things. So that being said, let's dive into the first pillar, which is the physical, which I know I've heard you talk many times about how that's the easiest one to wrap your minds around for kind of the average person. So can you talk a little bit about what, let's say, within that pillar, what or would be the key points and the things you stress most with your clients as far as working on that is going to give you the best results quickest, or most bang for your buck?
Absolutely, yes. So with nutrition, what I have found, as we all know, every body is different, and a diet or an approach to eating that works for one person might not work so well with another person. So it's really about understanding what works for you. With that said, there are commonalities across the board. As you mentioned, I do have my own podcast. I interview people who reverse incurable illnesses, air quotes there for listeners. So I don't believe in the word incurable for the vast majority of illnesses. In fact, I want to go a step further. I don't believe in that at all. But the body is phenomenally powerful. It heals itself. I've seen some of the most incurable things be reversed. And the body doesn't get sick because of a pharmaceutical drug deficiency. It gets sick for reasons. And that body has to communicate that it's toxic somehow. And it does it with a symptom. It's like a warning light on your car dashboard. So the engine oil comes on, and it's an invitation to say, okay, let's go to the mechanic and investigate the cause. So what might be the cause in terms of diet? There are some commonalities, particularly in America. Modern hybridized wheat grain, it's gone through a process called mutagenesis. It's been man-altered. If it's been man-made or man-altered, don't eat it. Golden rule. Don't touch anything fake, anything altered, processed, artificial. With the gluten, the wheat grain, it used to be 1.5 meters tall in its natural form. And now they're called dwarf crops because these proteins have been added to the original grain. It's been altered through mutagenesis, and these crops now are about 1 foot tall. And it's great for the agricultural industry because the farmers yield more or less time. However, it's horrific for our gut. And then we have the Roundup Ready solution, where it's been laced in this herbicide, which is now known to cause cancer. Why wouldn't it cause cancer? Glyphosate. Look at the clues of what it does to insects. There's no way that can't cause cancer in humans. So the Roundup situation is horrendous. I don't understand how Monsanto was ever allowed to function. I do, because of the way the financial structures work and the FDA receiving 65% of its funding from the industry it regulates. That's a whole rabbit hole. So I can see how things are regulated and approved. We just need to look beyond all that stuff. What makes sense? And if we consume anything that's man-made, man-altered, fake, we want to steer clear of it, because it's really, ultimately, it's interfering with Mother Nature. It's interfering with the nature codes. One of my golden rules is to never, ever interfere with the nature codes, the fabric of our makeup. And the moment we do that, we are taking a huge gamble with our health. And that's not just food, it's anything. So some common culprits: gluten, dairy, unless, you're super careful, super mindful about where you're sourcing the dairy from. Some people swear by, you know, full fat or, raw milk, which has not been tampered with. I'm a fan of saying, dairy is designed, milk from cows is designed for baby cows to grow fast. It's to give them that massive boost in life, to give them that huge boost of all the nutrients, the hormones for these baby cows to grow fast, which look absolutely nothing like humans. So I used to live on breakfast cereal, wheat, and milk. So I was living on a bowl of inflammation for most of my life until my early 30s. Fortunately, I had a conscious mom who wouldn't let me have sugary cereals, but I'm still having wheat and dairy. And I do remember as a kid being told when I had really bad eczema flare-ups, take wheat and dairy out just until it clears up. And at that time, I was thinking, that's absurd. How could I ever do that? I live on that stuff. And I'm now getting it because it's the first two things I removed. And I thought, interesting. Wheat, dairy, sugar. Those three things, if we replace, we don't have to quit them, we can replace them because that's better for the mind. The moment we introduce a sacrifice into the body of I'm going to quit something, it doesn't tend to last. So if we can say, okay, I'm going to replace something with a healthy, nutritious alternative, it's more long lasting. So those are three culprits. And those with autoimmune diseases typically go a step further and might do paleo, for example. I did paleo for the first half year, maybe even a whole year, actually. I just noticed how beneficial it was. Paleo is organic everything, majority plant-based, still had meat and fish and eggs. Everything was organic, no grains. And no grains appears to be a very good solution across the board for anyone who has an autoimmune condition, whether it's paleo or a grain-free vegan approach. Vegans and vegetarians tend to load up on grains, and that tends not to actually help with autoimmune. And I've noticed a commonality that grain-free works very well. Again, every body is different, but I think if one is listening to this and they have autoimmune, at least consider it. The argument for paleo is we don't have a digestive system for the breaking down and digesting grains. Birds do. So, that with that said, I have the occasional grain now. I eat a bit of white rice, and every blue moon I'll have a bit of gluten. I'm pretty much, that's the strictest thing I'm strict about. So gluten, dairy, sugar, anything man-made, fake, just avoid it. If man-made it, don't eat it. Look at the labels, be a gluten detective, be a label detective, and just think, what is in alignment with nature, what isn't? Oh, one of my favorite quotes is, if you don't recognize an ingredient, your body won't either. #inflammation.
That's amazing. Love it.
Yeah.
So just a real quick side note, one of the things you said is you're just hitting that literally. I don't know if we read the same stuff or we're just going all the same thing. I'm a big non-gluten. Gluten is terrible. If you look at the studies of gluten, if you do biopsies on people that take in gluten, even though they don't have celiac disease, right? That's the big one. 90% of people have inflammation in their gut from gluten. Yeah. These things, I ask my patients this kind of stuff all the time. They have never heard of one word that I'm talking about. It's very frustrating because this needs to be common knowledge. Same thing with dairy, but the great thing is paleo. I was a paleo fanatic, and so I was putting my patients, 5 years I spent putting my patients on paleo diet. The ones that were able to do it were tremendously benefited. And we went through all this. We have these paleo sheets. I was giving all these patients, we were getting a lot of weight loss and things like that. One of the things, and I don't know if you run into this with your clients, is that the paleo diet, because you're eating clean, whole, healthy foods, tends to be a lot more expensive than going out and getting, cereals and all the stuff in the middle aisles of the grocery store. And so I had some issues with keeping people on paleo because in some ways it's much more expensive to do that than to have, the Uber driver take you to the convenience store and, get some, Hostess cupcakes and some other stuff and, like really cheap food. And so I've switched, and I just want to get your thoughts on this from an anti-inflammatory. I've switched from the paleo diet for my patients to something easier, and that is an intermittent fasting protocol,
Mm,
because people are not, it's a lot easier just to put them on a clock and be a little bit less strict with what they take in. And so, like for for males, and I just want to really get your take on this. For males, I usually put them on a 4 to 6 hour eating window. So we start with 6 and try to bring them down to 4. And then for females, I try to keep them more around the 8 hour eating window, only because there are some hormonal changes that are different that happen in females. And when they get like really small windows of intermittent fasting, I feel like sometimes that's more harmful because they get into these different type of states. What's your thought on like paleo all the time versus like a true intermittent fasting versus combining them, doing paleo in your window, which obviously is like primo. When I'm
yeah.
at my best, I'm doing paleo inside of an intermittent fasting protocol.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome.
And I've done this for quite a while now, a 16/8 fast. So I'm not doing the 4 hour eating window. That's pretty punchy. And it's great. If you can keep it up, great. I've got some friends who just do one meal a day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we were meant to have 3 meals a day. So my first meal is 1:45 now. I haven't had my first meal yet. And I think, if we can fast for 16 hours, it's or 18 or 20, whatever you're doing every day, that is creating tremendous value in the body with
Mm-hmm.
anti-aging hormones and human growth hormone and detoxification and the rest of it. So insulin resistance helps with that of course, big time.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I think about comparing them? That's a really great question. So I think it's individual dependent
Mm-hmm.
because some people on the intermittent fasting route say you can just eat whatever you want during the during the eating window and don't really worry about it. But I think that's missing the point because if you start eating inflammatory things during
Mm-hmm.
your eating window, your body's still going to have to then go and detoxify from what you've just consumed. So, like you, I think the combination of intermittent fasting with paleo is just really optimal. What's doable for the person? I started a new client couple last Friday. I love working with couples; it's fun, but if they have a good relationship. So when I talked about paleo in the second week, one of them, the woman had said she's done it for years, and she said she felt the best on it. And I said, well, would you consider doing that again? And both of them said maybe not just yet, but they would do gluten, dairy, and sugar free because that's a much easier replacement. And then we might go on to paleo at some point. But in answer to your question, I think I would always ask the person on the receiving end of the information or
Mm-hmm.
whoever I'm talking to, what suits you best. I haven't seen a study comparing intermittent fasting with paleo, so I can't actually answer that. I think they're both brilliant. They're both anti-inflammatory. And I think it's really up to the individual just to test it out and see what works for them.
And for 99% of the population, they do either one of those, it's an upgrade from what, they're doing now. Obviously, it's
Absolutely. Yeah.
the American diet, especially with the amount of sugar intake. And I know you're going to agree with this, is nothing that I don't have any other word other than there are criminal forces out there that are creating these toxic food environments that are allowing the high sugar intake in our population with really no sense of trying to stop this, this disaster. There was and I don't remember the exact study, they just did a monetary study, and they said if people just kept their sugar intake down to what our kind of governing bodies recommend, and again, that's way too high anyway, but even if they did that, it would save $2 trillion to the healthcare system.
Wow.
$2
I
trillion.
believe that.
And so it's like it's incredible. And imagine the effects on obesity and metabolic disease, and diabetes. And one just quick thing, that, and I know that you're aware of this, but just so our audience gets it, one of my favorite authors out there is Jason Fung, the author of the
Mm,
Obesity Code.
it's
Okay,
great.
I know. I call it the Bible, and I really give it out. I'm going to start giving your book to my patients because I think it's easier for them, honestly, than the Obesity Code goes pretty deep down that rabbit hole. But I think the one message that I'm really trying to hammer home is 90%, this is according to Dr. Funk, almost 90% of people can completely reverse type 2 diabetes by getting on an intermittent fasting protocol.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Why are there not commercials about that? Why are there not every billboard in our state, in the great state here of Minnesota, should say, if you have type 2 diabetes, intermittent fast, and you will no longer be a diabetic and potentially ruin your life. And so
Imagine hearing, I was going to say, imagine hearing, ask your doctor about intermittent fasting.
yeah, well, that's a
Instead of ask your doctor for this drug, ask your doctor for this.
Absolutely. But you understand that the monetary value of that to the powers that be, obviously, again, just trying to be as politically correct as I can, the level of injustice that is being created by food environments, pharma environments, and these other things, it's so drastic and it's affecting the entire population. Now, one of the things, I'm passionate about are disadvantaged communities, because they have no idea about how much it is really affecting them. And it's an education thing. There's a lot of stuff going on, but it really goes across the board. I'm sure, how many of your clients are, very well off, but yet their lifestyle is hideous? And you've completely, turned that around, that train, and it's made a huge difference. Because if you don't have your health, you could be a billionaire. Who cares? What's the difference? What does it matter?
I heard the quote the other day. Those who have their health have many wishes, and those who don't have their health have one. And it doesn't matter if one is a millionaire or a billionaire or earning, on the breadline. In answer to your earlier question, one can be very wealthy, very well off, and still be eating garbage, because it's what we've grown up to know. It's what we're familiar with. And the moment we start really being mindful about what we're consuming, it's amazing how many people's bodies can be transformed.
And again, not to, continue to belabor the point, but the fact that these types, it's interesting, because some of the people that listen to this, they're going to say, well, they're just saying things that are, that's a very small percent. I'll say, well, these are all obvious things. But frustration, I know you share the same frustration, is that it's nowhere near obvious. And there is a mass psychosis in our society where everything has to be the easy button, right? They don't care, right? They're just going to do this, and they're going to either have a pill or some procedure, something's going to save them, right? Like the general medical, and it's the way that they tap, you're right, sick care. They're tapping sick care, not really health care. They're tapping the medical system in a way to fix the problems that are caused by all these other, lifestyle issues that they've been dealing with. And by the way, you are a quote machine. So just keep the quotes coming. As they go. You are a quote machine. I'm glad this is recorded, because I'm just going to write all this stuff down and just start. I love it. I just want to get a little bit more into inflammation and ways. So one of my passions, and I've pretty much brought up this word on every single podcast I've done so far, and that is mitochondrial health. Can you talk a little bit about the way that detoxifying the body, whether through avoiding toxins, eating the right nutrition, avoid, intermittent fasting and letting the phagocytosis happen, all that stuff. How does that affect mitochondrial health? And give our audience a sense of how important the mitochondria are in supporting every single function of your trillions of cells.
Yeah, first up, mitochondria, often known as the battery of the cell, of which we are 50 trillion or 100 trillion cells, depending on which cell biologist we speak with or hear from. Every one of these cells that we have in our body is electrically charged. And we don't think of ourselves as electrical, but we are fully electrical. Think about every heartbeat, every thought, every emotion, every time we move a limb, everything is electrical impulses. And our cells are they're powered up by different batteries, and one of them is the mitochondria. There's also the cell membrane. We also have the battery packs, which are, or rather the muscles in our body, which are often spoken about as our battery packs. We have the DNA, which is the golden mean ratio that spiral, which implodes scalar energy, which is also another form of electrical supply into our DNA. So coming back to the mitochondria, the easiest way I'd like to explain it is if the body is having to deal with toxins, it drops the voltage. It drops the oxygen flow to our cells. And that is when we go into dis-ease. So one of my favorite teachers on the body electric, by the way, is Dr. Jerry Tennant. And he says a characteristic of all chronic illness is low voltage to an organ, or low voltage in an organ. It's not because of a genetic disease in, 98% of the population. It's not genetic, and I'm doing air quotes again. It's because we have low voltage in an organ. And this gives us power, literally and figuratively. It gives us our power back to go, okay, why is there not enough power going to my thyroid in the case of Graves or Hashimoto's, or in my pancreas in the case of type 1 diabetes, or to my gut in the case of most chronic illnesses? Why is there not enough power? And a lot of that is very linked with the mitochondria. It's the energy function. It's the battery of the cell. If we don't have enough power reaching these cells, we're going to fall into dis-ease. So if we consume toxins, it drops the voltage, it drops the oxygen flow to our cells. And the moment we start doing intermittent fasting, we start to regain that function again. If we go on an anti-inflammatory diet, that also regain the function again. So the fasting is phenomenal. I did a 5-day water fast at the beginning of this year for the first time, actually.
Wow.
And have you ever done it?
I have not done it. The most I've done is like, 24-hour fast. I have one of my closest friends. He does these 5-day water fasts. He's having visions. He feels amazing. It like completely recharges him. And I think it is a big mitochondrial recharge to do something. How'd you feel after the 5 days?
Great. On day 3 is when I was starting to get my energy back. Day 1, I did do ketosis for a week beforehand. So I was already transitioned into being a ketone burner rather than a carbohydrate burner already. And I would say I'm metabolically flexible as well. So I transitioned into ketosis okay. And then once the water, the biggest challenge for me was kind of boredom. And I realized how much of my days are revolved around food. Even though in the morning I don't have any food. Lunchtime, it's something to have a break and have
Yes.
A delicious meal or a snack mid-afternoon, and evening meal and social environments. That was when I started thinking, wow, this is really dull. But I was noticing that my body was creating energy. And it was very interesting to me that I had almost the same amount of energy as I did with food within day 2 and 3. And then day 4 and 5, more and more energy. So it's interesting that, my body just became a fat burner and I got not hugely leaner, but for me, I was noticeably leaner.
Noticeably.
5 days. I wish I did before and afterwards because it wasn't my intention. My intention for doing the water fast was what you mentioned about having visions and the energy fact. That's why I was wanting to do it. I wanted to see what would happen in my meditations, and would I, have a DMT release or something in my breath work, which I do every morning. So I wanted to see if there would be something different. Anyway, I did think it was a powerful exercise. I think it was a huge exercise in understanding the power that the mind has over the body, our temptations, our routines, our habits, and understanding that we are okay without having multiple meals every single day, and knowing what it does with detoxification, the shedding of all these old dead cells, lifeless cells. It's just, I would recommend it if you're, if it's safe for you to do it.
Yeah, I will. I'd obviously have to, I don't have many weeks off. I wouldn't probably do a water fast while, weeks that I'm doing surgery on patients, just because I just don't know how intermittent fast. I'm a pretty regular intermittent fasting, and I usually eat around 2. I try to, push it till 2, unless I've had a very intense workout in the morning, especially if I'm pushing the sled, if I'm doing like heavy sled work or heavy leg work. Sometimes I'll break the fast by 11 or 12, only because I don't want to get into a big, huge catabolic state because I've overdone it, because then that is also pro-inflammatory in its own way. It's just
I'm the same.
It's a balance. It's
Yeah.
really it's a balance. My favorite, and again, and this is great, but my favorite is on weekends where I'm off. Then what I'll do is do long fast and then try to power through like some crazy workout fasted. And I feel like
Mm,
that is like the energy. And then I'll like towards the end of the workout, I'll start taking in something. I'll have a protein bar or something like that and start taking in so I don't go too much into a catabolic state and be drinking pure amino acids during the entire
right.
workout. The science behind that, it's up and down, but you like you said earlier, it's different for everybody. There's a reason like a Tom Brady can be a vegan and not lose an ounce of muscle while he tried to get some of his teammates to go on the vegan diet. And, in 3 weeks, they were getting run over by the linemen across from them. They had no chance because their bodies are not, they don't process, they don't burn the same way that somebody else would. So there are genetic variations in the way that we process our foods and the way, there's people that are better at burning glucose and people that are better fat burners. It's a whole entire, science that is another 10-hour podcast that I'm sure, that we can, do down the road. One last thing on the mitochondria. And I just have one quick question after that, but I just want to make a comment on the mitochondria. And then I want to get into the other three, pillars, because we've spent a lot of time on the physical. It's just fascinating. It's the easiest thing for people to wrap their minds around. But, I'm involved in this wellness project. And one of the things that we really focus on is everything is about jumpstarting the mitochondria. So one of our slogans is recharging the human battery. And
Oh, I
I
love
love it.
it.
I actually have your book open to a page where you talk about all the different batteries, and I love it because we have always talked about mitochondria. I'm going to start using the muscle packs, because it's really easy for people to wrap their mind around that as another battery. Like your muscles a battery, your DNA is a battery, the mitochondria is a battery. But long story short, all of the modalities that we're doing, like in the wellness thing, that are outside of nutrition and this and that, is so we're just, we're doing exercise while under oxygen to just, really quench the mitochondrial cells, and also like hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin with just high dose oxygen, and then
Wow,
doing pulsed electromagnetic frequency, which
amazing.
also obviously recharges, and then structured water therapy. And then, the big one obviously is the near infrared,
Mm,
beds, which are absorbed in the mitochondrial wall and stimulate increased production of ATP. So
right.
those are more hacks. These other things are lifestyle. Those are hacks. But if you combine those things, man, it is a powerful recipe. But 99% of the population isn't doing anything. They're
Yeah,
just
right.
having their lunch, and then they're having their bag of Doritos and then some cookies because they're tired at work. And it's just a vicious cycle of events and inflammation. And I know you've talked about like leaky gut and all these other things that can happen with these pro-inflammatory, diets and toxins. I just want to ask you one other thing, which is very interesting. And I love the way you talk about it. And I've heard you talk about this before, and people do not talk about this enough. And honestly, it wasn't even on my radar. Now I'm telling all my patients, I'm like, you should do the studies on this because Neil says you got to look into this. And that is the possibility that we are being, quote unquote, poisoned by these cell towers that we live near, the 4G. And you talk about 5G, and I started doing some research on 5G. We don't even know what 5G does because it's a completely different spectrum,
Exactly.
and we haven't even studied it enough. And meanwhile, we're just surrounded by all this 5G stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about like the way that these waves can actually create a toxic environment in our bodies? Because it's something really that hasn't been much on my radar for sure.
Yeah, it came onto my radar particularly because back in 2017, I had a basically flu-like symptoms for about a month, and I just could not shake off a cold. And I was like, what is going on? I was living in LA. I was super fit. I was anti-inflammatory nutrition. I was drinking veggie juices every day. I was working out, doing yoga, getting sunlight, going in the ocean. I was thinking I'm doing everything, quote unquote, doing too many air quotes. And I just could not shake off this cold, flu-like symptoms. And my friend and business partner at the time said, go down to Costa Mesa, see this guy. He helped me turn my health around in 3 months. So chiropractic, kinesiologist, lots of other things. He tested me and he said within 10 minutes, he said, these three teeth on the side of your mouth, where likely where you hold your cell phone, have become depolarized. And I said, okay, I don't know what that means. He said, your teeth are like circuit breakers in your body, and we're wired up like a house. All these different organs on different circuits, they all go through our teeth. And you have most likely got EMF poisoning from your cell phone. And he said that I'm seeing it with so many people and they have no idea. So depolarizing, meaning, we talked about electrical charge in our cells earlier. Our teeth have also a positive and negative charge. If we're depolarized, the polarity is flipped from a net negative to a positive charge, dropping the voltage in that circuit. Now, I used to be an electrician back maybe 12, 30, oh my goodness, what year are we in? 14 years ago. So when I started to look into this, it started to piece together very quickly. I was like, all these pieces of the jigsaw puzzle started to come together. I thought, oh, okay. So we're wired up like a house. It's just that everything can be compared with a house. So if we don't have enough voltage to the organ, that's when we get dis-ease. And I had flipped the polarity in my mouth, and the tooth had dropped the electricity, the power in my immune system. And what he did is he used lasers on me. He literally put me on a bed and directed lasers onto my teeth. And I thought this was the weirdest thing I've ever had done to me, but I'm just going to roll with it because he was recommended to me by someone I trust. And sure enough, in 2 sessions, my cold went away. He said, don't ever hold your cell phone next to your face ever again. For that reason, I've never bought Bluetooth headsets. I never will. And it really started to get me to look into the EMF thing. And before 5G launched in 2019, I went very loud, by the way, in England when I realized 5G was being launched because of my own suffering. And also because I read a lot of studies prior to 5G being launched. There were already 6,000 peer-reviewed studies talking about how cell phone radiation creates cell and DNA damage. So pick an illness, any illness, doesn't really matter. So I went very loud on that in 2019, thinking this is extraordinary. Why are they launching out a new technology? Even the WHO classified EMFs as a potential carcinogen in 2011. It's still there. So there's tons of studies now. You just read 3 studies and it's very convincing. I always remember my dad telling me when I was about 18, 19, when I got my first cell phone, he said, that thing is going to give you brain cancer. And I brushed it off because I thought, no, it's fine. It's new technology. It's going to be totally safe. Of course, I think his intuition was on, it's accurate. So in 2019, they launched 5G without any biological safety testing, zero, nada. And I was in the UK on social media going, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I built up a huge following very quickly and created a group around it. And because there's a lot of people tuned in going, yeah, this is weird. This is wrong. Like 5G towers were being built outside near to people's homes and people were getting nosebleeds. They were getting low-level headaches. They were getting depressed, all these things. And by the way, all of these symptoms have been measured way back when they started to implement even radio waves. So there's a book called The Invisible Rainbow, which I reference in my book. And the author, Arthur Furstenberg, has very brilliantly, articulately researched how preceding every pandemic, going back, I believe, about 140 years, was an increase in electromagnetic radiation. So it's very convincing. And some will say correlation doesn't equal correlation, all that stuff, those programs that we've had instilled in us. However, when you look at it, if you look at blood under a microscope, when exposed to EMFs, it tells a story. The blood tells a story. And it's very obvious what happens. They've read the human energy field when people stand in front of a smart meter. It's obliterated. So our cells are very sensitive to these EMFs. I do use my phone, and I have my laptop in front of me with Wi-Fi. And I do have various things around me protecting my field. I bought a machine called the Soma Vedic when I went to the health, what was it called? A health optimization summit in London in 2019. I met this amazing company called Soma Vedic, and they got these devices which will harmonize the effects of Wi-Fi radiation in your home. So I got one immediately. Thankfully, he came on my podcast and donated me one. That said, I recommend radiation protection for all of my clients. One of the friend who I said I supported in him reversing cancer, I've
Mhm.
just to say again that I didn't cure it. I didn't do any of that. I was on his supporting team among other people. One of the first things I said to him was look into radiation protection, get grounded when you're sleeping. And as he was cleaning out his body, detoxifying more and more, he became more and more sensitized to EMFs. He would be driving along. This is actually on my podcast, and he would know when he was approaching a cell phone tower because he detoxified so much. He started to get a headache. So he started to buy Faraday hats. He bought, which is protection from the EMFs. He got Faraday clothing like hoodies. I've
Whoa.
got EMF protection underwear. I've got EMF pants,
What?
which there's a company called Lambs, getlambs.com. Quick shout out for them. The science they have behind it is brilliant.
This is,
What?
I'm honestly, this I didn't, I mean, I haven't heard. The fact is 6,000 studies on this stuff. I think I got some stuff. I have a lot of reading to do
Yeah. I
because
mean,
I think
just to give you.
now, I mean, I'm going to be looking on that device because, protecting ourselves from obviously these fields is very important. That is fascinating. The thing about the teeth, I actually haven't heard you talk about that before. That's absolutely fascinating and concerning that
Yeah,
that they could see that, in your teeth. I got to do a lot more research on this and probably will do a post about it because it's fascinating. I love learning new things, and that I was not expecting there was that much research on it. I am familiar with the WHO, situation from back in 2011, and clearly, we are just surrounded. And it's additive, right? That plus this, plus
exactly.
plastics, plus these other
Exactly.
things. And then I did a podcast with one of the White House medical officers, and we really went down the rabbit hole of all of these toxin exposures that our veterans get, these burn pits, and doing research for that one, I went through all this stuff. I didn't realize these burn pits could be like 10 kilometers long, just burning tires and benzene in the
Oh
air. And
my
all
goodness.
that stuff gets in your mitochondria. You combine that then with being around cell tower exposure and bad diets and things like that. And it's just a recipe for, it's a toxic brew for where
There's
we are now.
Yeah, it's a toxic brew. Great. I saw there's a brilliant Gaia interview. I believe it's called High Voltage Living
Mm.
with Glenn Streeter. Brilliant. I recommend it to all my clients. And he talks about the triage effect, which is just what you just said. It's a number of different things happening at the same time. If we have a cell phone radiation, and then we have mercury in the mouth, which is also dropping the voltage and causing immense toxicity. By the way, on that note, I've always got to say this: if you do have mercury in the mouth and you get a bioresonance scan that says it's causing inflammation, whatever, always recommend to have mercury out by a holistic and biological dentist and to be done super safely because it's that poisonous.
Wow. Okay.
That's it. Yeah. So let's say there's radiation from our cell phones. We have mercury in the mouth. We have other toxicity going on. Maybe a new medical intervention. Maybe there's lots of things happening at once. We need to be super mindful of this without being fearful. We can detoxify from all of it.
Mm.
Something else he said is we live in an ever increasing toxic world, but the great news is we have solutions for all of it, which is amazing. We just need to be aware of it. And the moment we become aware of it, we go, okay, let's test myself. And then we can test ourselves now. We've got bioresonance machines now that can determine what is at the cause of illness. So we're living in pretty amazing times. So that triage effect that I mentioned and the toxic brew you mentioned is worth to be aware of, but without being fearful. We don't need to be fearful about this whole thing. Above all, our energy is more important than anything, and we want to be keeping a high vibration.
And so,
Yeah.
I think that, just closing down on the physical stuff, and then we can just get through the other stuff, which is fascinating. So definitely don't want to leave that stuff. It's just fascinating, the other stuff. One thing you said is grounding while you're sleeping, something that I do routinely to detox the body, sleeping on a grounding pad. I talk to my patients about it. Again, never heard of it. They've never heard of anything. They haven't heard of intermittent fasting, grounding, red light therapy, toxins. Now I'm going to get to talk to people. I don't want to scare them by telling them, if I start listing 100 things that toxic, but
Yeah.
it's the education and awareness, and not just living these oblivious lives where, you get your Frappuccino in the morning at Starbucks, and then you're on yourself getting all this radiation, and it goes on and on. It's just it's not the virtuous cycle, it's the vicious cycle. And what you're doing is you're putting them back on that virtuous cycle, and you can detoxify from all these things and reverse disease. And I have seen it when people actually just make some of the changes,
Yeah.
it already can make dramatic. They're not even the same. They walk back in my office 3 months later, you wouldn't even recognize these people
Yeah.
after 3 months.
Right.
And that's just with a dietary change and a couple of other things. And so just
Yeah.
getting this message out. So I want to get into we'll combine the mental and emotional. One of the things I love the way you say this on some of the other, shows you appear on, is your vitality vision. Can you tell us, what is the vitality vision? What do you mean by that? And how can that be like overarching for the whole mental and emotional piece, those two pillars?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question. The vision part is a very prominent part of the mental. And I think a lot of people, and myself included, in the past would start a fitness program or a new health program without really getting clear on the vision. And this goes beyond just motivation, because if we start off a new program or a brand new year, for example, and say, with a New Year's resolution, want to burn 30 pounds, that's not normally enough inspiration to get results. Whereas what I ask all of my clients to do, I don't even like to continue with them until they've done this, I've got a template where I guide them through the creation of a vision, where they write a short paragraph. The shorter, the better, really. But the point is to get super clear on our vision and how our new vitality is going to impact us in every areas of our lives, which is important to us. Intimate relationships, family, children, if you have children, or intimate relationships if you have a partner, or if you want to attract a partner, and or friendships and beyond, work life, hobbies, really tuning in to how the body is our vehicle for doing all of these things. And I almost every time I start with a new client, they say they've never had this kind of opportunity to dream like this. And there is a part of it that feels dreamy. And I say, well, actually, it's not that dreamy. You can get this body you want. You can burn 30 pounds, although I say don't think about it as burning 30 pounds. Think of it as getting lean and strong and flexible and all these other words, because we don't want to focus on weight. We don't want to focus on fat burning. We want to be focusing on what the end result is. So this vision is actually an emotionally charged statement. So it's not just a goal that we're setting by X amount of time or X time in the future. It's getting really excited by this vision of how our body, our newfound vitality, is going to impact every area of our life, and get clear on it and infuse it with all these high frequency words, which, it's in my template. I won't go too much into it, but the purpose of this is it becomes a guiding light for the next 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, year, whatever, ongoing for life. And we can always change it. We can always change our vision and optimize it. And I think without that, the failure rate would be, I'd have a failure rate. I don't want to interfere with the very high success rate that I've got. But I'm being a bit silly here. I want my clients to be successful. And it has to start with the mind. It has to start with getting clear on that vision. And part of it is also finding out what holds us back from doing it.
Yeah, I think that, that's fantastic, because you said it right. Like that motivate, motivate really means like what, like just to like, why are you really doing this? It's not like somebody screaming at you to, to do, because that goes away. Great stuff. And if you don't have a vision of the future, you're just doing stuff haphazardly. And you're right. It's no different than people doing some rehab protocol for their spine after the spine surgery or whatever. If they don't have a vision of that recovery and things like that, then the compliance rate goes down and they start really struggling. And then a surgery that we did that may have technically been great, or, or at least adequate enough, then becomes potentially a failure because they don't rehab their muscular structures and rehab themselves and do the dieting and all the other stuff, that's that. So that's a great answer. One of the things that I've heard you say before is that you feel like maybe even though the physical is important, that the mental pillar might be the most important of the pillars, so to speak. Can you tell us a little bit, why do you think that?
Well, because it starts in the mind, and I'll circle back to the mention of the brain chemist. When we have a thought, our thoughts trigger cascades of chemicals and hormones. Like our brain is literally a chemist. So if we have a fearful thought, we will typically secrete concoctions of fear compounds, fear chemicals, fear molecules. Whereas if we have a thought of love and appreciation, care, gratitude, which is also tied to an emotion, we trigger a cascade of love chemicals. Bruce Lipton talks about the difference between love and fear, how we literally change our biology by how we think and how we feel. So again, chemicals of love are very different from the chemicals of fear. So it does start with the brain, and that's tied in with the placebo effect and nocebo effect that we mentioned earlier. So in terms of what's more important, this is a really interesting point, because at the beginning, like 2015, when I really discovered about inflammation properly, I was thinking it's all about inflammation. It's all about nutrition and exercise and getting grounded and sunlight and all these things. However, the more I've peeled back the layers of the onion, I've realized that there's a hierarchy. I call it the hierarchy of healing. There's physical, emotional, mental, and then there's the energetic piece right at the top. Arguably, to involve the world of energy, which I know we'll come on to in a moment, that starts with the mind. It's just that I see energy as the overriding force. One can meditate and visualize and go into a heart and brain coherent state and heal without changing anything about their body, about their diet, about their lifestyle. That's crazy. That's quite fascinating.
Absolutely.
So, people can go in with a mouthful of mercury and still heal, believe it or not, because I say believe it or not, for me, a mouthful of mercury would suggest a lot of challenges. That said, the world of energy is like so high up the food chain, because we are energy at the subatomic level, that people can bypass other things. Now, that I do think it's worth doing every pillar because it's just easier. I'm just saying that because I've seen evidence of it. And I get it because of quantum physics and just incredible teachings in that world, which date back to the beginning of time, ageless wisdom. We mentioned Joe Dispenza earlier, by the way. What I would love to say is, even though I highly rate him, we don't have to follow just him. He's teaching ageless wisdom, and he's teaching principles that have been around since the beginning of time. Indigenous cultures have been teaching this since the beginning of time. He's just got a brilliant way of connecting these spiritual practices with data, with unequivocal data.
Yes.
And he's got a phenomenal way of teaching it. That said, I've been mindful about not idolizing him. And I've also been told, careful not to idolize him. That's, even though I think he's brilliant, the point I'm trying to make is we can do this ourselves. We can meditate, we can visualize, we can adopt all these principles that literally do go back to the beginning of time.
Yeah, and it's interesting, going back, I think that him connecting what from visualization, meditation, getting into these states of no mind, of tapping into the quantum field. And again, this is like some of the people watching this are going to be like, I don't even know what these guys are just even talking about, but just tapping into that quantum field. The thing that one of the things that I don't remember which of his books, and that was the first time I'm like, I really need to read all this guy's books, is when he talks about the fascination with like the quantum field. It's so interesting that the electron does not appear. It appears where you look at it. So in many ways, we are willing the electron to be in that spot. It can be anywhere in that cloud. If you look down, if you look at if you look down and to the left, that's where it is. If you look up and to the right, the electron appears there. That is so it's so profound, but it just says how our power of intention actually can change the physical world. It's just, it's so, in the mental world, the physical world, and that's how he ties that quantum field with then the results that he sees with, I know he talks about like the blind seeing and the tumors regressing and all that stuff,
Mm.
but it's just fascinating, and and I feel like he's one of the easier to read. I love Bruce Lipton. He obviously just famous, and Dispenza is a kind of a follower of him, and so, but it's just fascinating. Before we get too far down into the energetic, which will be the last topic, I just wanted to ask you one of the topics that are fascinating, and you mentioned it briefly before, but this thing about trapped emotions. And it's that feeling of something's wrong, I don't know what it is. Can you talk about like what trapped emotions are and how with your clients you've been able to help them to at least get into that closet and maybe release those emotions and how that's benefited them?
Yes, and I'll start with another quote. The organs weep the tears the eyes refuse to shed. That's William Osler, and I mention it on, I think, every podcast I'm on. Really speaks volumes for me, that quote. The organs weep the tears the eyes refuse to shed. So when we go through life, all of us, even if we can't remember these events in our lives, we go through traumatic experiences, and it can be as small as an argument with someone where we were jolted out of alignment. That's the way I'm going to describe it. Like we're happy, then we're not. And it's like a jolt. And that jolt, some kind of event that shook us, it left an energetic imprint on our body. So it's like the way, I love the definition that Dr. Bradley Nelson uses. He says emotions are stored as electromagnetic bundles of energy. They have a mass, an energetic mass. And these energetic masses, these bundles of energy, get stored anywhere in the body. We often can relate to tension in our shoulders or in our lower back, where we store emotion. And if we're stressed, we often feel it in those places, particularly as guys. And women as well. Women tend to store it in different places, is my understanding. So, however, with that said, we store emotions everywhere. So we often store it in our psoas muscles, which is around our hips. And there's ways that we can just release it very quickly. Now, there's many ways to release trapped emotions. There's many ways to skin a cat, as weird as an expression that is, unkind to cats. So we can release this energy. And one of my favorite ways to do it is with kinesiology. So you're asking the body yes or no questions. Your body's like this memory bank of everything that's happened since birth, or arguably before, but let's try and keep it down to earth. If we see a good kinesiologist or we learn kinesiology, we can muscle test and we can get yes and no responses. We can find out the names of emotions, when they were stored, where they were stored, if they were in this lifetime or inherited, and go ahead and release them really quickly. And I've had clients who have had release of pain even in the same session. It's often within 24 hours to allow the body to adjust. But I've had, one of my clients a couple of years ago, I always remember, she had this kind of locked shoulder, or like a shoulder that just didn't have that flexibility. And she'd been on a very strict anti-inflammatory diet. She was doing high intensity and yoga. And she's like, why can I not get rid of this? So I said, let's just do some emotional release. Let's see if this works. And she said something like, are you kidding me? What? And she started to be able to move.
Amazing.
And she was lying on her back. And she said the next session, she was like lying on her shoulder, which she wasn't able to do before. And I've had clients with hip pain, lower back pain, migraines, knee pain. The pain is the fastest way to notice because it's so prominent. That said, think about it in organs. I had a client recently at the end of last year who had 20 years of immense pain. And the medical industry removed 4 organs. And the last one, it was almost like trial and error. Let's take out your gallbladder and see if that helps. It didn't. Still left with his pain. We did 2 emotional release sessions. It wasn't immediate, but within about a month, she went, I'm pain-free. I don't know what's happened. And I said, that's the power of emotional release. It can be quick. It could be painless. We don't have to go into the memory. because there's another quote that says nerve cells that fire together wire together, or neurons that fire together wire together. The more we talk about a traumatic event, the more energy we give to it, and the more attention we give to it. And the more attention we give to a memory, the more energy that flows to it, and it ends up becoming more of a problem. That said, with somatic therapy, like the one I just mentioned, we can release the energy without talking about the event. And therefore, we can just free the energy up without having to, go over all the details. Because a lot of people don't like the idea of going into the traumas, and I get it. I don't. It's not fun. So why not do something that is more interesting and less painful? Another way of doing it is breath work, transformational breath work. My whole body shakes. Plant medicines as well, ayahuasca, psilocybin. I hope you don't mind me saying it. It's getting more. My whole body becomes activated, and I release this trauma. Sometimes I feel like I'm releasing trauma for other people as well. There's so many ways. Trauma release exercises, TRE. I was introduced to this by a friend of mine, maybe in 2015, 2016, when she had chronic pain, and she discovered the power of the mind-body connection. And yeah, TRE is when you tire out your muscles and you end up lying on the ground, and you allow this energy to shake out of your limbs. So there's many ways to do it. And I think it's a really important piece. And it's also a piece that very few people even get to on their journey. And they're thinking, I've tried everything, but it's often the last place people go to, if they go there at all, because it's so it feels abstract and so alien to us, because all we've known is whatever we've known our whole lives. But if we can understand us as energy beings, and we trap this electromagnetic energy, we go, oh, okay, there's a blockage. Oh, it's dropped the voltage in my circuitry. Oh, okay, now I need to go and release it. I know I'm saying it simplistically, but I hope there's a way that this lands in a way that is simple for our listeners.
So what I would say is this stuff is like beyond fascinating to me. And so we struggle enough to talk to people about the physical changes that they need to make. This is a whole other level, because now you can't, in other words, with these like energy, releasing of traumas, this and that, like they don't see it, but it is clearly correlated. And there's no question that when people are in traumatic situations, or some trauma has happened to them, and I just see this with my people. I'm just trying to maybe make it a little bit more concrete. So people, if you have a trauma and you already have some other disease process going on, let's just say you have low back. I'm going to give an example. You've suffered for low back pain. You've got some bad discs. You haven't really taken care of it. You just, whatever. You're a back pain person. It's crystal clear that those patients, if they suffer a serious emotional crisis, without question, end up having way, way more pain. And that is just a way to think about it, because again, both of us talking, and some people are going to be surprised they're hearing like a spine surgeon talking about energy fields and tapping into the quantum space and things. And I'm deeply passionate about this stuff, actually. But just it's as simple as having these trapped emotions, which sometimes then goes into that realm of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They're repetitive thoughts. I know that's something that we could talk about again for a long time, but almost that PTSD is reliving that same, trauma over, and then magnifying the effect even worse and storing it, whether it be physically or emotionally or whatever, and getting through that. So the treatment of a lot of these things are a combination of fixing their cellular health through the physical, through maybe some of these biohacks that we love, like just trying to treat their mitochondrial, like their brain through like transcranial, all the stuff. But then there's their energetic component, because the brain is one huge battery, right? And it's just all these different signals. It's in it. I'm sure you use this terminology too. Like the brain is just an antenna, right? Our brain is our antenna to tap into the quantum field. Everything out there all around us is just one big quantum field. And this antenna that we were given taps into that, and you tap into it how you want to tap into it. You can stay confined and just be in this little tiny box, or you can branch out, and there's just like this massive, we're way beyond, even like everything. It literally is everything, right? Everything, because we're all connected through the quantum field. And so reaching out. So when you're releasing these emotions, I'm sure you're doing it through some meditative techniques and other things, and they're just tapping into that quantum field, releasing it. It's complicated. And sometimes, and I know I've heard you talk about this before, sometimes it just starts getting into these realms where, man, they're like, I don't even know what these guys are talking about anymore. I just have no clue, where they're going, but it's so powerful. So on that note, can you talk about just bringing it into like actionable steps? So I think one of the things people should do is seek some kind of a person to guide them on that journey, getting through emotional traumas, whether it be through, people like yourself or a psychologist or something like that, people that just do this, for people. But another thing I know that you're very big into is this world of meditation, which is something I've gone down that well, and when I am meditating, it's the best that I feel. There's no question about it. Okay. Recently I haven't been as good about it, but can you tell people like the changes scientifically that happen with meditation, proven science, undisputable science that happens when you meditate, and how that can create changes in our bodies that can change literally the chemist, right? You're just
Yep.
changing everything, and you could potentially change your whole life just by meditating.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Would you like me to tell you about the trauma release bit first?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the first resource, I always love to give credit where it's due. Dr. Bradley Nelson, he wrote the emotion code. We use magnets to release the trapped emotions. We don't even talk about
Okay.
the quantum field. We just go down the central meridian and there's a technique to actually release it. So it's so fast, and it's for me, the best way of doing it. Now everyone's got their technique. I just think for
Wow.
me, it's leapfrogs everything for me. Although there are more fun ways of doing it, like breath work, when you get a DMT release and then
Right.
plant medicines, etc. Anyway, discoverhealing.com, Dr. Bradley Nelson. That's the technique I use. Find someone who is certified in the emotion code and the body code. And I sometimes I feel weird about, putting people away from my own site, but I just think, why not give people the value?
Just a quick question on the magnet release, because something I'm going to do some research on. That sounds fascinating. One of the things that is becoming really big on the treatment of PTSD, depression, anxiety is this transcranial magnetic stimulation. Is the magnets that you use on the whole body? What are the magnets? Are they just like physical magnets that you use, or is there some machine that you need to put? I'm not familiar with this technique.
There's literally, you can use a magnet. We're going pretty out there now, but we can use an actual magnet, like a fridge magnet, going down the central meridian, and you do it with an intention. I intend to release the emotion from my. It's very easy. It's ridiculously easy. There's no machine, and you can even do it with your fingertips, because your fingertips apparently have magnets in them. We're going really out there now. I just want to share how easy it is. E-motion on Gaia. In fact, I think it's on YouTube. E-motion, energy emotion. It's Dr. Bradley Nelson features on that documentary. It's brilliant. It's an hour and 15 minutes long. Watch it again and watch it again, and then go, oh, no, I get it. Watch it until you get it.
100%. That I,
Yeah,
like I said, love, and I know
yeah.
you have
So
your own
I was talking to
podcast.
listeners rather than you,
Yes.
but yeah.
Yeah, no, but 100% no. But like for me, one of the things that I've loved about, starting this podcast is bringing people on like yourself that has a totally different knowledge base than I might have.
Yeah.
And I'm learning about it. I'm going to go see that because it's just fascinating. When I started going down like this wellness rabbit hole, I can tell you, I was always fairly open-minded, not like extremely open. I'm a Western trained physician, so I don't want to say I was super open-minded, but in the last 2 years where I've really gotten just outside of just diet and all the physical stuff, and I've gotten into the, more the meditation and these other realms and a lot of these biohacks, like my mind is so opened up that like literally there is nothing that you can say on this show that I would say, I'm never going to look into. That's a bunch of nonsense, because I've been proven so wrong. And it's just like, before, like I learned about like the power of like near infrared therapy, I did not really, I thought it was nothing. I thought it was just a gimmick. And then I did not realize there were thousands and thousands of studies on this stuff, as I'm sure, just like there's studies on, 5G, all this stuff. But when we don't keep an open mind and we are just closed and we're like, because I know that when we start going down these tangents, we both worry that the audience is like, oh my, these two, why don't you guys go on a retreat and you could talk about it over there, kind of thing. But we have to keep an open mind, because we need these types of different approaches, because the approach that we are taking in the West, I'm going to just be blunt, it is not working. We've been doing it over and over again. We are getting sicker and sicker as a population. Nobody spends more per capita than we do on treating chronic disease, but the results are not good. And so if if these magnetic things work, I have a guy coming on to talk about specifically transcranial magnetic stimulation and tremendous reversal of depression and anxieties and other things. I'm really fascinated, because that's something we may bring into our wellness centers. I just need to learn more about it. But thank you. I'll be watching that video for sure. That seems fascinating, and it is nice that it can be done at a low cost, because a lot of these hacks are expensive. If you want to do them on your own, like going out and getting a red bed, like a true red bed with enough irradiance to be powerful, is very expensive. So doing simpler things, but it sounds like you need somebody to help you with that, somebody that's trained in that to help you to do the emotional release. So hopefully people do go out and watch the video. So I'm sorry, so back on the meditation piece, do you want to talk a little bit about meditation and the science behind it, and what you found personally with meditation, and what with clients that you've got down that track?
Yeah, so many things. So first of all, if we go onto PubMed, we can just search, what does meditation do with inflammation? Inflammation comes down when we meditate. That's scientifically shown in peer-reviewed literature. If you go onto the likes of Joe Dispenza's studies, he talks about how they've measured about 2,500 metabolites. What happens in the body when we are in a meditative state over a period of 7 days? We typically meditate 3 times a day over 6 or 7 days. And the second time I went was actually for a biological upgrade. I thought, I just want to meditate a long time and just be entertained by his talks. We know scientifically that we secrete a concoction of chemicals superior to any drug in deep meditation when we enter these different brainwave states. In a heart and brain coherent state, that's when we spend a lot of time in that state. And I've also got my own heart and brain coherence tracks. When we connect with the heart and we are resting our attention on the heart, and we are ultimately experiencing emotions of love and joy, care, compassion, we are changing our biochemistry. The HeartMath Institute has been studying the heart-brain connection for 30 plus years. They know about the direction of communication of information between our hearts, our guts, our brains, and they can show it. They've documented the direction of communication. And they know what happens with our HRV, our heart rate variability, when we're in a heart and brain coherent state. And HRV, a healthy HRV, is indicative and of a number of different biomarkers. Like, it's a really great thing if you've got a healthy HRV. Just being simple about it, or simplistic. We know that if we are in a state of appreciation, we have a healthy HRV. Slow the breathing down a bit, deep breaths in. We do this every day after breath work with Wim Hof style breathing. I tune everyone into some heart and brain coherence, and we just breathe slowly. 5 in, 5 out, 5 in, 5 out, calming down the body. The nervous system can be changed so quickly just by changing our breath. We're communicating with the body that we're safe by slow breathing. And then we combine that with heart-focused breathing when we tune into a high vibrational emotion, like appreciation or gratitude. We're getting a biological upgrade during that time. So back to meditation, heart and brain coherence is a type of meditation. And we know that we are secreting these chemicals of love. So with a more kind of open space meditation, let's say we're just letting our thoughts go. And by the way, no one can let go of thoughts, by the way. So many people start and go, oh, I couldn't do it because I had an overactive brain. That's totally normal, absolutely normal. I can't sit there like a monk with no thoughts for hours on end. Even if I get a few seconds with no thought, that's beneficial. And it's about practicing being like the passenger of your thoughts. and like observing them when they come in and then just letting them go, but being aware, because meditation helps us to become the conscious observer of our thoughts.
Yes.
And the more that we practice it, the more that we can tune into that in our days when we start to be in a reactive state. It happened with me this morning. I thought all these tech challenges are happening when I'm launching a community today, and I'm getting frustrated. And I'm thinking, okay, Neil, practice what you preach. Breathe, don't react. And I caught myself several times going, Neil, surrender. It's okay. No one's dying. And just reframed it very quickly. The more that we meditate, the more that we become present, and it becomes a practice of being present. And the more that we do it, the more we're able to catch our thoughts and stop them spiraling. People who are depressed and on antidepressants often spiral one thought to the next, and they spiral down. We can spiral up. We can actually spiral from a consciously planted thought to another high vibe thought, to another high vibe thought, and we can actually feel better and better. The teachings of Abraham Hicks from a more kind of esoteric realm, but they talk about how we can literally go up this process of appreciation into all these high vibe emotions, and then we literally change our biology from a more scientific standpoint. So meditation's amazing. It helps us later in the day. It sets up the foundation for the head. And we know scientifically that about 2,500 biomarkers are improved, thanks to Joe Dispenza, who's been measuring all of this for many years. And also outside of his studies as well. Deepak Chopra, I remember seeing him in London maybe 5 years ago, talking about thousands of studies linking meditation with all these incredible changes in the body.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think number one, I will tell you, as you were talking about this stuff, I started taking really deep, I just started doing my own deep breathing, because it is true. Learning to do that and taking yourself back to the breath, as far as like having the thoughts, what I've done when I meditate is, I agree with you, my brain's all over the place, right? I'm just, it's pretty hyperactive, and I just focus on the breath. So if I can start, I do the counting. So when I start counting breaths, if I can get through, 7, 8 breaths in a row, for me, that's amazing. And there is tremendous benefits, and it does set the day. Because when I've done meditation, I do it in the morning to set the day, and then remind myself to do some deep breathing during the day. Like sometimes in between surgeries, I'll do some deep breathing, and it definitely de-stresses me, but actually energizes me at the same time and refocuses me, especially if it's going to be a very long day. But if you start with meditation early on, you're more likely to remind yourself to take those moments and slow things down. Think about, just getting back into that slow breathing process where the brain can detox a little bit, so to speak, not to get there, but just summarizing and just getting all of this together. So I think that if you take your 4 pillars, you fix the physical, right, which decreases inflammation, and then you work on the mental, emotional. You're going to release those trapped emotions. You're going to have positive thoughts, this and that. And then again, that also goes into the energetic, where you're tapping into this quantum field. You're tapping into the positive energy. You're spiraling. I love it. The spiraling up of thoughts, which I haven't heard before. I like that. That is a good analogy, because we certainly can spiral down, right? When we start having these repetitive thoughts about, like something happens, like, right, you say something you might not have wanted to say. At the beginning, you're like, oh, he probably didn't like that. And then about 20 minutes later, you've decided that he's going to report you to somebody because you said, I know I'm getting reported. And it's like the most, it'd be the most simple thing. It's nothing. And it just starts spiraling. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm not even going to work out today. I'm too upset. And it just keeps, but the other way, you could talk your way around the other way. Wow, that was positive. This is great. I'm going to use the remainder of my day to better myself so that I can help other people in my life to get better. You start thinking thoughts like that, man, your life is better. So I think in a nutshell, if you put all of your 4 pillars together, and I know I put you on the spot by asking you, if one is more important than the other, but I think that in the totality, if you put all of them together, it is just like people's lives, like the life changing. That's what I just, I cannot get that across to some people. Like they just look at you. The people that you're seeing when you're like on your podcast and or you're talking to people, whatever, a lot of the people are seeking you out. A lot of people that are seeing me, they're just forced to be there because their back hurts and somebody referred them to me, or they self-referred because they think they might need whatever it is. And so a lot of times I'm not really preaching to people that have already opened their mind that, want to hear this stuff. So it just makes it difficult. And I think that the way that you put these things, like you said in the first couple sentences we talked about, you put them so simply. I think it will help a lot of people to understand that. I'm definitely going to get your book in the hands of a lot of my patients, because I feel like it's right on their wavelength of where they can start getting it from somebody that knows how to talk to the, just regular people. And you don't get that far down into it's very simplistic. One thing I do, want to ask you before we start, wrapping up, and honestly, I'd love this to go another 2 hours. And I'm just basically controlling myself because I have like another, 50 questions that I could ask you, because there's just been such a wealth of information. How do you handle one of the things that bothers me the most? How do you handle that middle-aged person that essentially has given up? So what I mean by that is they don't feel good. They're generally unhappy, and they're just like, that's the way it is. I'm 52. This is 52. This is what you get. How do you turn around the mentality? Because honestly, I struggle with it, because it's almost like they just do this, right? Like you try to, and they're like, I just live like this. I don't care. I'm just going to, go get some candy when I'm done, with this visit with you. Like, what's your secret sauce? Like, how do you get through to that person that they're just done? All their friends are like that. Their group, everybody's sick. So one guy has a hip everyone's got something. Like, how do you break through?
Yeah, this is a big one. There's always an opportunity for us to tune into our why. What are we creating in the world? What lights us up? And, tying it into that vision that we spoke about earlier, really encouraging my clients to dream. What if it is possible for you to get your body back in full shape and not be painful and walking around with joint pain all day? What if that is possible? What would that mean for you? How would that impact your relationships? Or if they're single, maybe you'd like to attract a relationship. Do you have a good, maybe they've got kids, would you like to be more vital for your kids? And really, I like them to come up with the answers as much as possible, just steer them with questions. Ultimately, I believe there is always scope for really finding the true essence of who we are. And sometimes it's a challenge. I tend not to work with people, in fact, ever, who don't have that, because they wouldn't be working with me otherwise. There's always a desire to hire me. I have tried to help people who haven't helped me, and then they've done their own thing. One person I thought about during this is a friend with cancer I mentioned earlier, who reversed it in less than 2 months. He had such a strong reason to live, huge reason to live. The option of him not surviving through it wasn't there. He's like, I've got kids, I've got a wife, I'm cleaning my body out now. I'm going to get to the cause. He's also got an engineering mind. He works with cars. He's like, there's a cause here. There's a cause behind the cancer. He just knew intuitively as well. And he's also done years of transcendental meditation. Like, he's just tuned in, tapped in, turned on. So whereas another person in our same community, he didn't seem to have that desire. And he didn't hire me. And I tried my best. I guess there's more I could have done. I wanted him to find that desire, that why, that reason to live. And that other person, there were things that he seemed ready to not continue, which is sad. Yes. But that's his choice. And something I'm always reminding myself of is, got to honor people's journeys. Again, people who hire me already have a level of why. I just help them get more tuned into their why. And I try and influence and help those around me, my friends, my peers, my family, whoever. And sometimes I'm left with the old, you just got to honor their journey and respect their journey. And then I'm like, I feel a bit gutted now, but I get it. So I guess My quick, that's a long answer. I think there is always an opportunity to tune into the true essence of who we are, to really dream and find that dream again. No, I've got friends in they're in their 80s. I've got a client who signed up at 78. He's planning his next 10 years. He's like, vitality is my vehicle. I was
Love
having
it.
lunch with two friends who were 81, 8 yesterday. They breathe with us every single morning. Super vital. They're really great friends, and I really look up to them. They are a walking, talking, breathing example of what the body is capable of. And they both got very strong reasons to live and to be vital and to give and to contribute and to grow and to, continue to awaken. They've got this huge desire there, and it's so clear, and they're vital. And that's possible for everyone, I think. We just need to get past what's holding us back.
Yeah, I think the way that, and I think, I think that was a good answer. It was a good, honest answer, because honestly, it is frustrating when you feel like you have the tools to help,
Yeah.
and it's almost like they're not listening, or there's a barrier, or there's something. And sometimes it's also because we are not the right person, right? There's always
Yeah.
somebody for you. That's another thing. But the way that I try to handle it, and I think a lot of people find that when they see me as a physician, it's a somewhat of a different experience that they might have with some people, because I'm just really dialed into their emotional and their mental things. And I like to talk about it quite a bit. But I think that the two ways I think that, and you're hitting it in your way, everybody needs a mission, right? You just need a mission, and you need to be hopeful. Like those are the two things. And you really have to tap into that. So I try to leave every visit that I have with any patient, no matter how horrific their problem is, or how they really didn't even need to be seeing a spine surgeon. They're just there because they had back pain. They just wanted to get it checked out or something like that. I always want to leave them with some hope. And sometimes the hope is not, they don't really need my services at all for, their stuff. I was just like, oh, you'll be fine from that. Just go get some exercise. I'll send you here, or you do these things, or clean up your diet, or we talk about those things. But a lot of it is just talking about exactly what you said, talking about what they're hopeful about, and why it's so worth it to get themselves in as good a condition, both physically, spiritually, emotionally, as they can be, so they can fulfill their mission and be hopeful in life, and be there for the things that are important to them, i.e. family members, or whatever it is. Or their hope is that they want to, build a village in Africa. Whatever your hope is, your hope could be it doesn't matter. We need, as human beings, we need to have a reason to exist, and tapping into that is so important. So, I think we're both saying it in our own way, but it is tough to break into some of these people. But what a difference it is when you can break into it.
Yeah.
And like, they undergo your program, and then you see the transformation, and you want to tell the whole world, why aren't you doing Neil's program? Because look at these other people, like, they're different people. Don't you get it? And the truth is, no, they don't get it. And how to break into that. I'm going to keep asking all my guests, like, how do we break through? How do we break through? Because I want to get better at it. I want to be, really just better at it. And I know you do as well. So I think, in closing, I just want you to, close it out, or if what would you say to folks that are thinking about maybe looking into somebody like yourself to be next to them, to be a fellow traveler, because we all need people to help to guide us. And you are basically a guide. I would consider you a health guide. Okay, I don't want to label you, as anything, because you wear many hats, but you're a guide, and we all need mentors. You're almost a mentor. When people take somebody on like yourself, it's almost like you're mentoring them in the things you've learned on your own, right? What would you say to those people? How would you get them to say, you need this, and why don't you sign up for the program, and here's what you might see?
Yeah, I do like the term guide, and I do see myself as a guide. And I often use the term partner in health as well as coach. So if I've been where they have been and I've solved it, I can help my clients navigate that. And I talk about a vitality journey as well, because I think it's a journey. It doesn't have to be like a 8-week or 12-week hardcore fitness program. It's not that. So what I would say, what I always say on a call is our body's ability to heal is greater than we have ever been allowed to believe. I'm not going to take any kind of client on, but providing they've got something where I've either got a track record of helping someone else do it, or I've got an absolute belief knowing that I can help them with that. I won't take on everything. I just want to put that out there. So if someone is aligned and they want to heal, they're already seeking. They're seeking beyond the mainstream. I don't have to persuade them that the medical system is challenged, in that regard. Phenomenal in emergencies, of course, and surgery,
Yes.
it's amazing. And as you said earlier, for chronic illness, it's not the best. So if people are already seeking beyond, they know something's not working. They know that there's more to life than what might be meeting the eye. That's where I come in and say, let me guide you on this path, because there is a really cool way of doing it. And the prize at the end of it is the world of energy and manifestation and tapping into our psychic gifts and skills and talents. And I'm just learning about scanning people remotely right now and picking out challenges in their body just by scanning in a meditation. I did not know that was even in my realm of opportunity 8 weeks ago. And doing hand healing, and it's the stuff that's coming through now is amazing. And I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking about this, because I think the ultimate of going down a vitality journey, or the holistic health path is some kind of an awakening. And we're going to be awakening until the day we die, ironically. But it's just stages and stages. And I think it just gets better and better. And everyone I've had on my podcast who has reversed a quote unquote incurable illness, they have mostly had a spiritual awakening. They're like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know this was available to me. People with cancer who reversed it holistically say cancer saved my life. They've got a different interpretation of what it is.
It's amazing. Amazing.
And I often say, would you change this whole thing if you could? They say no, because the crisis led me to this new way of living. The crisis was an awakening. I've got more goosebumps as I'm saying it. So I'm getting confirmation from another realm. It's like the crisis helps us to choose something different. The crisis helps us to better ourselves and expand.
Listen, that was beautiful. Honestly, that was perfect. And the thing is, the more you talk about the way you're helping people, I can see that you're becoming inspired. And that's what I do. When I start talking about stuff that can help people, you start becoming almost overwhelmed with emotion, because you know what is possible for these people and potentially what they could do if they just open their minds to this thing. And before I ask you where people can find you and any way that that they can connect with you, I just want to say I really appreciate you. One of my pet peeves has starting to become this word alternative therapy, because and I'm starting to hammer it on all these things. It's not alternative. It's just something else.
Yeah.
Yes, something isn't, I get it, it's but it has a connotation. When we say alternative therapies, the Western mind thinks voodoo medicine or, just made up stuff, or we're just alternative therapy. It's just different. Westernized medical care, what we can provide, what I can provide as a surgeon, what my colleagues can provide with medications and stuff. Honestly, if you look at the totality of everything we've learned from human civilization, it is a tiny sliver of the way we should be treating the human body. But unfortunately, we've made it the primary way that we treat the human body. And I much prefer the term holistic, because holistic implies health, wellness in a way that is not done in invasive ways or with pharmacologies and things like that. So I really appreciate that. And I think we need to change that word alternative. I don't know.
100%.
I don't know what the alternative to the word alternative is, but we need to change that, because that's associated. It's like any word that we have, any
Yeah.
derogatory word of something. Once it's derogatory, like even if you take like, things like people as certain ethnic groups have been called certain things, you can't take that word and all of a sudden make it it can't become like a positive thing. And so like we got to change. So how can our viewers or listeners find you? Where do they buy your book? I'm sure after this 2 hours that we
Yeah.
just did, I'm sure they're going to be wanting more. So how can they connect with you, or what's the best way?
Yeah, just quickly, the alternative health thing, I've made that very comment a number of times. You might have seen it in my book. I said on social a few years ago, there's no such thing as alternative health. There's health or there's drugs and surgery. And again, there's always the case for surgery and drugs and emergency. It's just, if we can reframe this and just say there's natural or holistic, it just opens up doors again. I recently heard that allopathic actually means alternative, which is quite interesting. Or
Yes,
stem.
it's very interesting.
Very,
That's a whole like I said, we needed a couple more
yeah.
hours of this. We might have to have a part two if
Part two,
nice
yeah.
enough, or maybe I'll come on your show, whatever. We'll figure it
Yes,
out.
I'd love
But
I'd
we
love to have
definitely
you.
need to speak again for sure. So
Yeah.
anyway, how can the folks find you?
Vitality.com is my main website. And if they go to /coaching, they can book a discovery call. There's also details of a new community I'm launching today. I do group coaching for men, and I do private coaching for men and women, and the communities for men and women. Again, community is starting today, 4th of March. So that's my new, I really want to build up like a movement, and I want everyone to experience vitality and energy and all of the things. Oh, and if they want to get my book, it's
Yes.
the Vitality Code is on Amazon. You can also see it from my website as well. So amazon.com, the Vitality Code, or the
Yeah,
previous one.
absolutely. And that's where we got your book. Like again, for the second or third time, my wife is absolutely digging into this book. She's loving it. She's already putting some of the stuff you talk about, into action in ways that she necessarily didn't think of before, because you put it in just a different way. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today. This has been incredible. It's everything I thought it was going to be when I communicated with you, before the show, not having ever met you. I just reading your stuff and just listening to, your podcasts and your appearances. I just knew that we were just going to get a tremendous amount of actionable information in a way that people can really understand. So for our listeners and viewers, please go out and get his book. Please follow him on social media. Please go to the vitalitysecret.com and learn more, and even book an introductory call, because I think it'll definitely be worth it. If anything, you'll get some of the inside information like we've gotten here, potentially specifically on your condition. So, until next time on the Wellness at the Speed of Light show, we will hope to see you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stefano.
Perfect.
That
Yeah,
was
we're
a
done.
wonderful.
Yeah, that was awesome.